good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kutan.
Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider the news of the day. Let's begin with the US Justice Department's settlement deal with Joe Low to recover almost $1 billion in funds linked to 1MDB. $1 billion, that's almost 4.2 billion ringgit. And now Dr. Mahathir, Prime Minister, says that Malaysia will be asking the US to hand over that $1 billion. Here's his clip.
The asset was bought with Malaysian money. We have proof that it is Malaysian money. We will now make a claim to the American government.
So that was the Prime Minister saying that we're going to be asking for the money back. Let's break it down, Sharaad, and take a look at this historic agreement and see what this means for all the parties involved.
Right, it's historic for a couple of reasons, Melissa. Of course, one is that it's just the sheer scale of the asset and values that are involved, and that is one reason. The other is just because of the complexity of the case, right? And the fact that the DOJ and Joe Low have come to an agreement that means bypassing years in courts and lawyers' fees and battles that are uncertain in terms of its outcome. This is obviously a victory for the DOJ's kleptocracy asset recovery initiative. The question I think a lot of Malaysians are asking, is it a victory for Malaysia?
Right. Well, is it a victory for Malaysia? Well, it depends on how we execute this, right? Whether we get that money back that Dr. Mahathir was talking about. I mean, the funds could be repatriated to Malaysia, and according to some analysts, this could also then allow us the resources to continue that ongoing trial of Datuk Seri Najib Razak. Also, it gives us an opportunity to start a dialogue with Joe Low, which will undoubtedly aid the Najib prosecution process, right?
Right, also, but because you realize that these are assets, not necessarily cash, and so there'll be there presumably going to be a sale issue around this, and then the question of, the valuations of these assets versus what actually can be recovered. So if you think of equanimity, it was sold, but it wasn't sold for the price that it was valued at at that time. So there are complexities involved. Of course, there's also, there was mentioned by the Attorney General that Malaysia believes that the actual amount that Joe Low was alleged to have siphoned from the 1MDB fund, from government coffers, amounted to some $10 billion.
Well, that's almost double, right?
Yeah, so there's complexity in stories. I think also, Melissa, there is this issue, right? For years of vilifying Joe Low as a central character in the the mismanagement, as critics put it, of government finances by the Najib Razak administration. He was a central figure, much vilified. Now, Najib Razak's on trial.
Right.
But if Joe Low evades trial in Malaysia, the question is, will people feel satisfied? I mean, having been sort of demonized for all these years.
Well, I have to ask this question as well, right? So we talked about how this settlement deal is a win for the US and the DOJ there. We talked about how this could be a possible win for Malaysia, depending on how it's executed. Is this a win for Joe Low? Now, many countries will perhaps follow suit and see this as, the gateway to perhaps granting Joe Low asylum. We know that now he's in the UAE and also has obtained asylum in another country based on the basis of human rights and political persecution, according to reports.
That's a possibility, and that's Joe Low's case to the world. And he's quick to point out that this settlement does not include admission of guilt or wrongdoing. But the DOJ, and I think this is often missing in many of the reports, the DOJ, the Justice Department of the US, makes very clear that he does not release him from potential criminal charges. Right?
There are some pending charges.
There are pending charges and future charges as well. So Joe Low is not off the hook. He might think he's the great escape artist, but he just might see justice in Malaysia.
All right, so this is a developing story, one that we will be keeping a very close eye on. In other news, there's a Malaysian couple in Norway who are facing child abuse charges. So Hari Muhammad and Norhila Kamis, they've been living in Stord, Norway for the past 10 years with their 5 children aged between 4 and 16. However, they'd lost custody of their children since May, and this was following an investigation by the Norwegian Child Welfare Services based on complaints made by one of their children.
Yeah, this started during the Ramadan month last year when one of the children complained of feeling stressed because of the long fasting period, some 12 hours it's reported. The teacher concerned the child was being abused, reported the matter to authorities, and the children were taken away from the parents and put into protective custody. Now, the question is, Melissa, is this a question of miscommunication? Cultural differences have translated badly across, in terms of communication.
Right.
Child just in some ways complying to religious necessities, but then that being read as abuse.
Well, okay, so when I read this story, I had a feeling of deja vu, because I think it was about 4 years ago, there was another case. A Malaysian couple found guilty of child abuse in Sweden and then sentenced to prison in that country. So the mother of the 4 children was handed a 14-month prison sentence for gross violation of the integrity of their children. The father was sentenced 10 months in prison, and both parents, so the couple, was also ordered to pay damages to their children.
Yeah, I wonder if they paid the damages. But more importantly, it seems to me, if I cast my mind back to that time, and if you do as well, what you'll remember is that the local media, especially the mainstream media, were very quick to defend the parents, asserting a Malaysian standard over the host country, Sweden, at that point in time. So, and saying that, somehow they were wronged. And I remember it wasn't a time where people thought deeply about our parenting norms.
Right.
It wasn't taken as an occasion for us to recalibrate those ideas.
Well, let's talk about those norms, because as recent as July, the pollster YouGov put out, the results of a survey finding that when it comes to corporal punishment for children, almost 50% of parents think it's okay. So, Malaysian parents are very split when it comes to the, the idea of how to, corporal punishment with their kids. So those are the parenting norms that you speak about. And you're absolutely right. It was a missed opportunity for us to take a closer look at how we, our traditional view of parenting. But I want to put it out there, is this the same case? Because I think that the Swedish case was really about corporal punishment, and the Norwegian case was about religious training for their children, or allegedly.
Yeah, because, I think I'm sort of agnostic about it, because I'm waiting to hear more details about the case. But I think, Melissa, regardless of the facts of the case, the issue, again, goes back to parenting. Now, can parents, or should parents, have the right to force their children into forms of religious obligation? I know that in Malaysia and many Asian countries, this is seen as completely abnormal, that your children follow in your footsteps when it comes to religion, and you can, in fact, teach them. And that teaching might be, at least in the subjective experience of the child, oppressive. So the issue, again, is, are we a society that thinks of children as autonomous beings who have rights and have the right, in some ways, to even deny the religion of their parents.
And it's also going to be interesting to see how countries like Sweden deal with cultural and religious differences. Okay, after this, we're going to turn our attention north and take a closer look at the divisive Penang South Reclamation Project. So stay tuned to consider this. Hi, welcome back to Consider This. Melisa and Sharaad here with you. Now, fishermen and environmentalists are up in arms over Penang's plans to expand its land area through a massive reclamation project. The Penang South Reclamation Development, or PSR, had been in the works since 2015, but approval was delayed by concerns over the environmental impact. Now, in July, Penang's Chief Minister Chow Kon Yeow announced that the federal government had given the green light to the PSR project, which will involve the building of 3 artificial islands off Penang's southern coast. Now, this will create some 1,800 hectares of land to be sold to the Penang, to fund the Penang Transport Master Plan. So we have joining us on the line Ku Salma Nasution, the Vice President of Penang Heritage Trust. Salma, thanks so much for joining us today. Now, I'd like to get your help to help us understand the opposition to this project. Where exactly is it stemming from?
On the one hand, you have the civil society and residents of Penang who are very concerned about environmental destruction that's going to be caused by the Penang South Reclamation. And then, of course, you have the fishermen who are actually fighting for their own survival because their livelihood actually depends on the fish that comes from the sea. It's live catch from the sea. So I think this year, we somehow got together and then we said, actually, we're fighting the same thing, so we should come together and stand together in solidarity.
Salma, a question of who is our stakeholders in the story, right? We do see the fishermen, and I think their plight is often highlighted by the media. But what about the projection of this project as being something about the future? It's about the islands will take 15 to 20 years to build. The development and associated economies are projected into the future of some 50 years. So are the stakeholders also the future generations, the children of fishermen who might want work in the modern economy that is promised by this project?
I think let's look at Penang not as an island but as a state, because there are a lot of people in Seberang Perai who have been waiting for development for a long time. And they say that actually the Penang state government has totally forgotten about them, even though the Chief Minister said in his Vision 2030 that the future of Penang is in Seberang Perai. But actually all the investment that he's trying to attract and is going to be for Penang Island. So the development, definitely the residents of Seberang Perai have a big stake in Penang.
Right. So you're thinking about decentralizing the development of the island and into Penang mainland as well. I want to touch a little bit, Salma, on the environmental impact of this project. Now, have the environmental concerns been addressed? Because if I'm not mistaken, the second version of the environmental impact assessment had been approved by the Department of Environment with a list of 72 conditions that were not disclosed, but it has been approved. So do you feel that that is sufficient to address the environmental concerns?
Actually, the EIA was activated in May during the fasting month, and we also responded to it. And 2 weeks after the closing date of the public response, the EIA was approved. And actually, when you look at how the whole process of, incorporating the public feedback, I believe the consultants actually only submitted the final report, and within 2 days, 2 working days, the EIA was approved. We find that very funny. And furthermore, the approval letter was signed by the Director General of the Department of Environment on his last working day. So we find the circumstances very funny. But actually how the EIA gets approved is because in the study area, they have already narrowed the scope of the impact area. So they're only interviewing people within 5 kilometers of the impact area. Now, there's a lot of fishermen who may not live exactly there. And furthermore, 12 kilometers from the impact area or less than that, there is the most important fish farming industry in the whole country. This is in Sungai Udang. And they are also really scared that the reclamation will affect them. So that will also affect our national food security.
Salma, is part of the story really about trust or a trust deficit between civil society, citizens and their government? Penang has other reclamation projects. I'm thinking of Tanjung 2 in particular, off Gurney Drive. That's been going for some time now. How do you view the approach of government doing that project, and does that have any bearing on how you view government today as it tries to push through this second project?
Actually, for the Sri Tanjung Pinang 2 in the north of Penang Island, the Penang Forum also, spent, many weeks compiling a report, and they submitted it, and within 2 weeks it was also approved. And I believe by the EIA was done by the same consultants who also did Forest City. Now, the fishermen who have been gone through the experience of Sri Tanjung Pinang too, who live in Tanjung Tokong, the whole North Coast, and also in Seberang Perai, the northern part of Seberang Perai, they're very badly affected by Sri Tanjung Pinang 2 reclamation. They say that the fish catch that they had, which was, so many kilograms before, now is only 30% of what it used to be. So that's why the fishermen as a whole are really against this reclamation, because most of the waters around Penang in the north and also in the channel have already been polluted. And this is the last remaining area where they have still quite, rich fisheries. And they really want to take care of this because they already saw how the other fishermen in the north have been suffering. Right. And furthermore, I noticed that Dr. Atif says that in 2016 they did a social impact survey, and they found that the situation in the south wasn't too good. And that is because, if you remember, the second Penang Bridge was only completed in 2014. The fishermen said that when they did the footing for the second Penang Bridge, they dumped the tailings, west of Pulau Kendi, and they forgot about the monsoon, because the monsoon blows everything back to shore. And when that happened, actually, 2016 was a bad year, 2015, and then the fisheries department thought about, sort of investing in artificial reefs. And they did that for a few years, and only now it is bearing results. That means the fisheries have been revived in the south. And now, when they start with the reclamation, the first thing they're going to do is scrape all the mudflats. That means within the first year of work, they're going to totally destroy the ecosystem. Can we accept that as Penang people, that we're not going to have fresh fish? Can the future generation accept that you have destroyed the whole ecosystem for them? And can the fishermen, whose very livelihood depends on it, how could they possibly accept that?
Salma, thank you so much for speaking with us. You mentioned Dr. Afif in your response. Now, we have him joining us on the line via Skype. Dr. Afif Baharudin, State Assemblyman for Seberang Jaya and Penang State ESCO Councillor for Agriculture, Agro-Based Industries and Rural Development, as well as Health, to give us the government's perspective and to respond to some of the claims made by Kusalma there. Dr. Afif, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Would you like to have a chance to respond to Salma's comments?
Thank you, Melisa and Salma, for the questions and some of the things that you have mentioned. I think first we have to agree that the rationale behind this Penang South Reclamation project is due to the development and population growth, and thanks to the job opportunities available in Penang Island. Our transport transportation infrastructure could not actually cope with the current and future demand. In fact, the key is ensuring Penang become more competitive among the foreign investors is for us to have the right infrastructure, and things like good telecommunication backbone, competent local government support, and of course an integrated public transport system. And also, that's why we have proposed the Penang Transport Master Plan. The state government decided at that time that we open a proposal and tender from the private sector to not only quote the cost of the project, but also methods in looking a feasible financing model from this project. So that's how we come about with the South Penang Initiative, where we find not only be able to fund the Penang Transport Master Plan project, but at the same time as a catalyst for the economic growth, especially for the community south of Penang Island. As you know, I think Melisa, you are from Penang, and we have seen a lot of
development start coming up in Seberang Perai, and we have to prepare Penang not only for the 10 years that's coming, but we are preparing Penang for the next 20 and 30 years. Seberang Perai, if I live in Seberang Perai, the amount of investment from private sector, investment by the government to improve the infrastructure, especially from the state government, is as equal as what we are doing on the Penang Island itself. But we cannot deny the fact the southern part of Penang Island itself does require a development. And with the current infrastructure that we have, for example, the Penang Airport and the free industrial zone area, free trade zone area in Bayan Lepas, we know for sure that it's already been congested and there's no vacancy at all. So that's the reason of expanding this to a new island on the south side of the Penang Island is the main reason why we will be able to say that this project will be the catalyst for economic growth in Penang.
Dr. Afif, if I could just interrupt you here, because we understand some of the economic rationale for the project, but in a time when the entire planet is talking about our environmental crisis, the question of trade-offs is a tricky one. You're saying we should trade our pristine environments where fisheries are got and so on and so forth for a presumed benefit in terms of jobs in the future. But can that logic hold today when the country, not just the country, but the planet is suffering from an environmental crisis?
I would say, I think if you look back at the history of Penang, even most of the heritage sites, some of it are actually on the reclaimed land that was reclaimed before by the British. And that's how the Penang state has been progressing years and years. And I wouldn't say that there is no environmental impact at all on this new proposed island. But that's why we actually came out with a very lengthy and elaborated mitigation plans in order to be able for not only the population, but definitely the environment itself, the ecosystem itself, will be able to handle the impact from this project as minimal as possible. And we already identified one of the reasons why our EIA were approved, and I wouldn't say it's being rushed. It's actually being a very long process, elaborated, and also being deliberated so many times. And there's at no one point NGO as Penang Forum has been able to be given the opportunity to actually come out and present their case in Majlis Perancangan Fizikal Negara,
right.
which is an honor for them.
Dr. Afif,
to be able to do that. Let me finish. Let me finish first.
We're almost running out of time.
Based on what we've discovered from the EIA, the fishing activities doesn't occur on this. That majority of the fishing activities doesn't occur on the main site of the reclamation project.
Okay.
On the reclaim area.
Okay.
It happens outside of the reclaim area.
Right.
So what is the main concern? The main concern is whether we could be able to provide the same ecosystem or the same environment as possible to replicate whatever being lost on that particular reclaim area. That is what the focus now.
Okay.
So we have discussed and looked not only on ecosystem. That's why the reason why state government has decided to form a task force on fishermen is not only to discuss on the issue of ex gratia, but what more important is that to be able to make sure that these generations and this population of fishermen will be able to continue their activities, right. One, or if they feel that they will be able to gain or move to a different profession, that is something that the state government has to come up with a program with.
So I hear you and the response that you've had for the fishermen, and that you are providing a compensation, and there has been a response for their concerns. Now, my question is, there's been 2 petitions out there with stating their concerns, 240,000 signatures. Does this represent the majority of Penangites' feelings towards this project? And how is the government responding to these to the opposition this project has garnered so far outside of the fishermen stakeholders?
I mean, we have also the polling data from what studies that we have done before, and based on the respondents that we have, I think we have respondents, more than 4,000 plus respondents also before that has who are actually the stakeholders of this particular project. I think the issue is here is not about addressing the polling numbers. The issue is here whether we have the visionary thinking of what the state of Penang should be in the next 20-30 years. Because as you can see now, I mean, relatively, I'm from the younger generation. in Penang. And I could see even those who are younger than me, there is a significant sign that they are emigrating outside from Penang and the northern region to the central region of Malaysia to find better job opportunities. And this is proven by the statistic by the North Corridor Implementation Authority, where they showed that immigration is high in the northern region and also in Penang. And more people are moving out from Penang, especially the younger generation, because when they want to build a better life and also to have a better job opportunities, they actually migrate to Kuala Lumpur or to Singapore. So I think what we need is that if we be able to maintain the vibrancy of the economic activities in Penang by doing this project, I think it's worth, in the sense that for the long term of the sustainability growth, the sustainable growth of the state of Penang.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Afif, and sharing your insights. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. With me, Sharaad Kutan. We will be back tomorrow at 10 p.m. with another edition of Consider This, only on Astro AWANI. Good evening.